Welcome to our channel. Today we're making sourdough mixed bread. Two very beautiful loaves in different shapes. One is a free-form loaf, one is in a pan, one with seeds and one without. You can get more out of one dough this way. And our sourdough mixed bread looks like this. The ingredients for our sourdough mixed bread are, for the pre-dough, rye flour, whole wheat flour, and sourdough starter. And for the main dough, more rye flour, wheat flour, yeast, salt, and since we're making a variation with a seed mix, we also have a seed mixture, and of course water in both cases. A quick note here, if you don't have a sourdough starter at home, you can also buy liquid, ready-made sourdough. But in that case, you'll have to mix in another 5 grams of yeast. The recipe explains exactly why. Making the pre-dough is incredibly simple. I have a bowl here with a lid so I can cover it nicely, which is quite important. Into the bowl, I pour my water. I add the sourdough starter to it into the water. You can do it the other way around, but it just mixes more nicely this way. There, boop. Now for my flour, and as always, very important, my wooden spoon. Simply add the flour on top. And now you can see I'm just stirring the whole thing with the wooden spoon, and this will take maybe 2 minutes. You don't need any longer than that. Because this pre-dough will then be set aside, covered for 8 to 10 hours at room temperature. The dough needs to mature. That's the whole point of this pre-dough, that it acidifies nicely so that my mixed bread will have a very delicious aroma later on. And with any bowl, at some point, the mixture in the bowl gets firmer and then I have to pick it up. You can see that now. It works much better that way. So that's it. The whole thing looks like this now. Of course, I'm taking everything with me because I'll need all of it later. Clean it up nicely. Now I'll go around one more time. I'll pull it into the middle a bit so that everything really acidifies intensively at the same rate. That way I'll have the same aroma throughout later on. So let's clean this up. This is how it looks. I'll cover this. And as I said, let it stand for 8 to 10 hours, just normally at room temperature, and you'll have a wonderful pre-sourdough for our sourdough mixed bread. So the pre-dough has now rested for 10 hours. This is what it looks like. You can see it has risen wonderfully. We have a nice porous structure all over. If I tear it open, you can see it particularly well. This one's going into my kettle now. You can also put the water in first, but it doesn't really matter. It will be kneaded well anyway. And I hope you can see how nicely it has fermented, how nicely it has soured. He smells wonderful too, I must say. It really smells like fresh fruit, a bit like apples. A sourdough starter should always do that because that's the sign that it's really good. So, of course, everything goes in there. Now at this point, I add my salt to the flour, making sure to distribute it evenly throughout the mixture. I realize that I need another spatula to help with the mixing process. I always make sure to stir it just a little bit, gently combining the ingredients, and then I crumble the yeast into the water so that it dissolves a little, making sure it is well incorporated before moving on to the next step. That's nicer, then it will distribute better in the dough afterwards. It might take a little while until I get where I want to be, but that can be shortened a bit by using time lapse. You can do it differently. You can also just put it directly on like that. The distribution in the kettle will happen, but in my experience, if you dissolve yeast in water, it really does get everywhere faster. The effect is simply greater. Okay, we'll have that in a moment. Pour the hot water onto my pre-dough. We'll definitely take this with us. Now all that's left is to add the flour on top, which helps it blend more evenly into the mixture. For best results, try to sprinkle the flour gently and make sure it covers the entire surface. I will now knead the whole thing for 6 to 8 minutes. A few notes. I take the finished dough out, divide it into 2 parts, remove 60 grams from one part, add 60 grams of my grain mix. This way I have portions of equal weight again, and I can make 2 variations of a very tasty bread from one dough. Okay, now I'm talking about my knee. The dough has now been in the machine for 6.5 minutes. I then took it out, divided it, and sowed some of it with seeds. Accordingly, I added to what I had put in here. So both have the same weight again. We will make 2 loaves of bread, one with grains and one normal. One goes into the mold and one goes into a basket. I've included the cup size in the recipe. There you can measure exactly and read how big the whole thing needs to be. I stretched and folded these 2 pieces of dough once, pre-structuring them a little. I'll cover it now, and depending on the room temperature, the dough will then rest for about 30, 35, 40 or 45 minutes. You can only find that out by testing it individually, but that's roughly the direction. They'll have peace and quiet for a while now, and then we'll open them up. The dough, or the 2 dough pieces, have now been resting for 45 minutes. As expected, they have risen nicely. This is the dough with the grains and seeds in it, and this is the one without. I'll now carefully shape both of them into a loaf so that I can place one of the loaves in a metal pan just like this, and the other one, of course, in my proofing basket, making sure each one is prepared properly for the next step. And just like that, I have 2 different kinds of bread. The grains, of course, also make them different. So I'll take this one. Stretch and fold, but not too tightly, not too hard. Don't press it out, just lightly, because I want to move on to shaping the loaves right away. As you can see, it's relatively simple. Enough flour so that nothing sticks, because the dough is just right. It's not too wet, not too dry. It takes well, as they say. And now I'm already starting to shape the first loaf. Here's a little trick. If you can't get the seam closed nicely right away, do what I do. Just press it shut and then roll your bread, or rather the dough, a little longer, so that you keep gently rolling over the seam, and then it will close up. Afterward, just press it together a bit more firmly and place it in the form. And of course, in this case, into the proofing basket with the seam side up. It looks like this. Why? Because later I'll turn it out onto the seam, make my scores, and then the seam has to be at the bottom. It's different here with the metal pan. I'll do the same thing again so you can follow along, as I always say. A little stretching and folding, not too much flour. I then move on and give it a little structure here. And here too, I'm already starting to shape the dough into a long loaf. Fold in the edges again so that it has the same thickness all around. Then I'll have an even loaf afterward. And now I'll also make this piece of dough, sorry. And I'll just roll it a little longer, close the sides again. You can also fold them in a bit so that you can achieve a nice, good result. And that's it. Here too, this is what it looks like when it's done. This is what the seam looks like. And now the dough goes into the pan with the seam side down. I'll press it down once. The pan will do the rest when the dough rises. So now they'll rest for 30, 35, 40 minutes in the final proof. Here too, it always depends on the room temperature. I'll cover them and then they go into the oven. I'll say something more about that in a moment. The loaves have now spent 35 minutes in the final proof. It's very warm in this room, so it's normal that it doesn't take quite as long. You can see they have risen wonderfully. When I do the finger poke test, the dent goes in, but it springs back out. I can still see it. This dough, these loaves are now ideal to be put in the oven. I could also let them rest for another 10 minutes. They would get bigger, but then the oven spring would be gone, and that's not good. Another tip, you can also see it very well when the dough starts to form these small tears here. Then it's ready for the oven. I have now prepared my baking sheet with parchment paper on one half of my proofing basket loaf. There. And of course, on the other side, that's where my pan goes. I place both loaves as far apart as possible so they don't hinder each other while rising. Sometimes a kind of microclimate forms between them, which isn't good, and then they tear open in the wrong places. Here I'll make a lengthwise score, and this one I'll score like this. For that, I'll move the pan aside again so I can make a nice clean cut. Then I'll make this pattern on it. Feel free to add an extra cut. Going over the scores again is not a mistake at all. You just can't let it sit for too long now because you can see the dough is deflating a bit. That's completely normal because the proofing gas is now escaping. Now for my center score here, 1 bowl cut across and 1 bowl cut back. That way you get everything. I'll now put both loaves in the oven at 225 degrees, my oven, 225 degrees. I'll add water to create steam. After 20 minutes, I'll let the steam out, reduce the temperature to 190 degrees for 10 minutes, and then I'll bake the bread at 180 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes to finish. All right, let's do that now. The 2 sourdough mixed flour breads were in the oven for 55 minutes. This is what they look like. They're baked through. I sprayed the loaf pan bread with a little water to give it a nicer shine. I hope you had fun watching. I can only wish you a lot of fun baking it yourselves. It's a very delicious, really good bread. As always, you'll find the recipe for this bread and for the sourdough mixed flour breads, both of them, in the video description below our video. I'll say thank you for watching and have fun with it, as I said, and until next time, bye.